Hey guys, welcome back to Mountain Murders.
Hey, I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
How you doing, babe?
I'm doing wonderful.
You are?
Yeah, we're in our new studio space.
We are. Hopefully the acoustics in here are a bit better.
AKA our new bedroom.
Yeah, totally. But we do have lower ceilings in this house. So
Yeah.
Our last house, we had really exceptionally high ceilings, it seemed.
Yeah, that's why it had that twang to it, that
It
echoey.
did, a little tinny sound
Yep.
sometimes. Yeah. Well, not to mention, we're not in a professional studio.
Well, there's two professionals in this room, though.
Well, I'm a professional. Bullshitter. Anyway, we are pretty excited. We're in our new place. We've been this entire week, moving. You know, it's crazy. We are we don't have that much stuff. It's not going to be so hard. But then once you start packing and moving it, we're we have a lot of shit.
So totally should have just bought or rented a U-Haul, backed up the house, packed it all one time, and drove over here once.
That's true.
Yeah, really, even though it's not that big of a move, you're talking about 35 miles or so.
Right.
But
I'm happy that we're close to town.
We are up in it.
And when we say that, but you have to understand, so we live in a pretty rural area, and where we were living, it was about 35 minutes away from where we are right now.
Yeah.
But we were kind of out, pretty close to the national park, and it took us 10, 15 minutes basically to get into town if you wanted to do grocery runs, something like that. Of course, we had a Dollar General there on every corner. We had those popping up everywhere, but for the most part, we were pretty far out, and if we wanted to actually go out and do something,
yeah, we were
it was an hour out from
Asheville.
Stuff. Yeah.
And it made even Waynesville look big. Because everything closed at 9:30, 10.
So now we're back in Haywood County, which is where I grew up, and you've lived here for most of your life. I would say.
Yes, my adult life.
But we're close to downtown, which is pretty cool because I'm kind of an addicted to exercise kind of person. I'm a little bit of an exercise nut. So being this close is awesome because now I can go on walks.
Yeah, I know. We can just go out and hit the sidewalk, son.
A couple miles a day. We're close to the breweries.
We are within walking distance of a few different drinking establishments.
And because I'm a nerd and I like to go to the library, we're very close to the library. So we're in a good spot.
It's great.
Yeah. I do think our house is haunted.
Yeah, I've already, there's been a couple of doors that open when there's no air moving.
Yeah.
Very slowly open.
Well, I was in the shower the other night, and you and your daughter were hanging out, just, I think you were unpacking, maybe washing dishes in the kitchen or something, and, she was just hanging out, and I was in the bathroom, I'm in the shower, and I heard the door open, and someone come in there, and I felt like someone was in the bathroom with me, and I even said, hey, because I thought it was you, and I was like, hey, what's up? Because I thought maybe you needed something, you were going to ask me something. Didn't hear anything, and I opened the shower curtain. There's no one in there, but I totally know there was someone in there. And then your daughter said someone was, brushing her shoulder the other day.
Yeah, Ayla was half asleep and said, why did you come in there and touch me on the, on the shoulder or whatever? Right. And I was like, I haven't been in there.
Yeah.
So I think it is
So we may have a haunted house, but that's okay.
It's okay. If you hear this, you're welcome. We're just here to hang out with you.
Yeah, we're not really, I don't get a bad vibe from this guy.
No, it's totally good energy.
Yeah, but I do think someone's in here.
No.
But that's fine. It's not my first rodeo living in a haunted house.
No, and it's not the first rodeo for a lot of people out there from some of the stories we get.
This morning I had kind of a weird experience. So you are back on your night shift, and so you were kind of sleeping today. And I was unpacking and just trying to get settled into the house a bit more. And these two men were basically out in our yard, and we live kind of off a street. So you have to actually come down the driveway behind another house to get to us. We're pretty private.
We're in the cut.
And so I see these two guys out in the yard, and I'm like, what the fuck is this shit? Because I don't know who they are. And immediately my mind is like, oh my God, these two weird dudes are going to come up and kill me. What's going on? And I had the, just the screen door, closed.
There's nothing to stop them.
Right.
They can
so
rush
I was like,
me.
Plus I'm in shorts and a t-shirt.
So you're scoping weapons near
no bra,
hand.
This is what I slept in. Not exactly I'm ready to have people come over, right? So I'm like, either these are Jehovah's Witnesses.
Which is bad, just as bad as a serial killer coming for you.
Or, hey, this is some weird thing. But they were census takers.
It's that time of the...
And I was like, oh. And then I started thinking about what an awkward job that is to just go from door to door, approaching
I want all
strangers.
Your personal information.
And it was just really odd. Yeah. They were like, hey, is this your mailing address? You get your mail here.
Who the fuck you supposed to be?
You know, blah, blah, blah.
Can I see some ID?
Yeah. Well, the guy did have a badge on, and he's like, oh, you know, we're not selling your personal information. And I'm like, well, I'm not giving you any. But anyway, it was just odd, I guess. So beware, there will be those little census taker folks out and about.
You should have fucked with him and be like, do you have a fluid gender or a gender fluid category? And ask things like that.
You think so?
Yeah, just to fuck with him.
We're going to bring you a great heavy hitter today. But first, I wanted to talk about this because I thought it was pretty interesting. On our Mountain Murders Facebook page, I posted the question, have you ever lived near a serial killer or where a murder has taken place? And we got some great answers.
Yeah, I'm totally blown away by some of this. This touches all across the board. Like, some of it's just like, oh yeah, you know, something happened a few houses down. Then some of these are big, huge cases.
Well, this is pretty interesting. So one of our Facebook fans, he's kind of sends us memes and comments on a lot of our posts, Danny Satterfield. He says, when I lived in Charlotte, I was living in Glen Hollow Apartments on Central Avenue. My neighbor lady was killed. Then shortly after, the lady behind me was killed. The killer was Henry Louis Wallace, also known as the Taco Bell Strangler. He ended up with 10 confirmed killings of women.
Oh my God, I don't even know about that one.
I do know about this guy, and I've actually considered possibly covering it on an episode of Mountain Murders. Even though Charlotte isn't quite the mountains, I think it's still close enough. It's within our reach.
Yeah.
But definitely an interesting case.
Taco Bell Strangler, how could you not want to talk about that?
Another Facebook follower, Suzanne Scott Mast, she said that her friend lived down the road from Alyssa Baker in Hickory, who killed her disabled stepdaughter, Zara Baker. You remember that story?
Did we talk about Zara, didn't we? Briefly?
Maybe briefly.
We touched on it.
But it's a really sad story. And also, she lived a couple of houses down from the Durham home, from the Durham family murders that happened in Boone.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
That is. Poor little Zara. That was such a sad story.
Yeah, there's so many of these really interesting ones. Leah Woody, who is actually a personal friend of mine, page follower, says, not a serial killer, but I lived within walking distance of the Oklahoma bomber Tim McVeigh.
Yeah. So I have one here. Matthew Spencer lived where Ted Bundy was born and a couple of hours away from Karla Homolka currently lives.
Wow.
That's pretty big connections there.
Dono Layton, one of my favorite tattoo artists locally, he says, in Florida, I live down the street from the Eileen Wuornos Motel.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And one lady here, Donna Belcher, commented that she dated a murderer.
Okay. Say that.
We don't have any more details on that, but I would be very interested in hearing that story.
Yeah, we might have to flesh out that one because I'd like to get the grimy details on that.
Well, my own personal, of course, we talked about this on the Peter London case, that my mom lives in the neighborhood near Peter London, like where he murdered his mother.
Yeah.
And you can actually see the house from my mom's house.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
And they've changed now maybe a decade ago, they changed the street numbers.
Did you nail it down which one it was?
Yes. So they changed the street numbers a few years ago, I guess, due to like the fire.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever they do when they...
We thought it was one, but it wasn't the right house.
So they come in and they have renumbered the streets, but we figured out the house.
Okay.
And it has been empty for quite a while.
Really?
On and off. Yeah, which is kind of strange.
Oh, I wonder if we could buy it.
I probably. You got some house buying money?
Well, I can get some.
Sign up for Patreon, folks. Help us buy a house, murder house. Well, I wanted to share a story with you guys, and I know that we're kind of getting a little long-winded here, but hey, we've got a lot to talk about, and we like you guys, and hopefully you enjoy some of our chit-chat before we get started. Speaking of like living near murderers and all that, my story is that I lived in the Washington, D.C. area when the sniper shootings were happening back in the early 2000s.
That's pretty wild.
As a matter of fact, I lived in Montgomery County, which is where many of those murders took place.
So you saw the entire region freaking out.
Oh,
like people running zigzag patterns across parking lots and shit to get
I had only lived in the DC area for maybe like 6 weeks before this started. So I was pretty new to the area and still learning my way around. And I lived in Silver Spring, Maryland, which is in Montgomery County. And my house was only about 3 blocks from a metro station, so I could walk to the metro and take the metro into the city for my job. But it was so scary at that time, I didn't even want to ride the metro or walk the 3 blocks to the metro from my house.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Everyone was looking for white box trucks.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was working at a theater in the public relations department of a theater, but I also was working at a florist kind of part-time to make ends meet, because I was definitely like the starving artist, like living in a house with like 5 roommates. Yeah, it was crazy. So they were looking for the white box truck forever. They thought the sniper was driving around. And so working for this florist, we had like a fleet of like 30 white box trucks.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Our drivers were getting harassed, pulled over, stalked. People were calling. They would see our driver in the neighborhood. They would be calling, reporting our driver suspicious.
Right.
We were getting calls constantly to the floral shop about the white box trucks and the drivers. I mean, it was just nuts.
And that son of a bitch was in an old ass car.
Yeah.
I mean, the way he would, that was
a Caprice, right? A blue Caprice.
It was very messed up and sad for all the victims, of course, but that was ingenious from the perspective of what he was doing.
Well, it just didn't fit any of the profiles.
No, and they'd laid a back
because
seat
they kept
down.
Thinking it was like a middle-aged white man in a box truck.
And they're like sighting out. I don't know if it was through the damn keyhole out of the trunk or what, but Jesus freaking Christ.
Yeah, it was nuts. I mean, you would go to a gas station and people would be like ducked down trying to pump gas, running into grocery stores. People just were avoiding like going out at all.
That was a true example of terrorizing an entire region.
Oh, domestic terrorism for sure.
I mean, that's the biggest, about the most memorable one that's happened in my lifetime as far as the ongoing terror. Because it's not like something blew up and then people's like, oh, it blew up, and then they go find the guy, you know what I mean? Which that's bad, but the fact that it just for weeks and weeks was out there and people kept getting dropped. Random ass people. Yeah,
it was crazy. But I thought I would share that with you guys. We got a lot of comments on this Facebook post about living next to a murderer. So if you haven't checked it out, go over there. We have like 71 people who commented, and they all have some crazy story about
I feel like we could do
or a serial killer or some famous case.
Whole bonus Patreon episode on people's comments. There's so many good ones.
Yeah, there definitely are. So as we mentioned, we are going to get into one of the big cases today in this region, a heavy hitter, if you will, suggested by our friend Gary, and that is the story of Pee Wee Gaskins.
Pee Wee motherfucking Gaskins.
And this is a case that you're not super familiar with.
Yeah, I unfortunately have to admit to my true crime buddies out there that I am not. I just know of it. I know that he was particularly brutal and mean, all that, but I don't know the damn details. The more I thought about it, so I started to just read up on it right quick, but I didn't. I'm going to learn about it with our friends out there, and they probably know more than I do.
Well, you touched on that he was very brutal and mean, and yeah, he kind of, I guess he wanted to dub himself as like the meanest man in America.
Right.
And so that was kind of his whole shtick, if you will.
Little man syndrome, you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll get into all of that. But Pee Wee Gaskin, so a lot of our information comes from his book, Final Truth, which I guess would be an autobiography. And it was put out after he was executed.
Okay.
A lot of the details in the book can't really be disputed.
Because it's basically...
Or there's no, follow-up with it. I'm going to say, we have Pee Wee's story. I'll give you information. Some of it comes from Pee Wee himself. But you might want to take some of the details with a grain of salt.
Oh, you have to, especially when it's the words from the killer's mouth, not victims, not people that knew them. Because a lot of these guys, part of it's just in their personality, the narcissism and the grandioso. And I think another part of it is they're going to be in jail the rest of their life. So if they can paint themselves to be a little bit bigger legend, that makes their jail life a little easier. You know what I mean?
Oh, it definitely does. And then if you're already in prison,
kind of make them famous,
for crimes,
more famous,
you're gonna totally add details. You're gonna pump up the story, inflate it.
Now,
there's the whole ego, as you touched on with the narcissism. So yeah, we're gonna take Pee Wee's story and just know that some of it is true, and then some of it could just be fabrications.
Right, a bunch of bad shit happened.
So it could just be a great example of creative writing. Well, Pee Wee Parrott, can you imagine the name Pee Wee Parrot?
No.
Was born March 13th, 1933 in Florence, South Carolina. You've been to Florence?